Well, good morning everybody and welcome to the rEvolve program. My name is Owen. I'm a physiotherapist of 39 years and now dedicating myself to training in dance, particularly an inclusive contemporary dance program that you can learn to develop dance projects in your local community. I'm also dedicated to working in leadership training, and I'm developing an online physiotherapy clinic for people who, mostly due to remoteness, don't have access to such services. So the rEvolve program was developed inside of a context that dance is a language, and in language we can open up new futures for ourselves. Taking that another step, I started to look at, well, what is language actually? We know it's a communication device, it's something that comes out of our mouths, it's something that we write in books or type now on our various digital devices. So we as human beings have developed a kind of very sophisticated verbal language, or oral language, and an equal sophisticated written or graphic language to go with it. The language is actually, in terms of the code they use, very differently, even though we come to see them as kind of the same thing. Certainly they're communicating the same thing, the kind of images of each other. However, linguists bring down all languages to basic units of the individual languages. With our oral verbal language, they call those basic units phonemes, the unit of sound. And with our written language, they call those basic units graphemes, or a unit of drawing. So, if we were to imagine that we could have a language of the body as sophisticated and as common as our verbal and written language, then that also will need some basic units that we all agree on so that we can all use. Now, I'm not here to say this is that basic unit of language. I think that's a question for an experiment that runs over maybe a few generations even. But what I am here to talk with you and work with you and invite you to is the big experiment, or the start of a big experiment in a common language of body. Now, I'm going to call the basic unit of movement, of a language of movement and a language of body, a moveme. So we have a phoneme for our oral language, we have a grapheme for our written language, and we have a moveme for our movement language. Our movement language is already writ rather large. However, it is only those trained, particularly dancers and some other movement artists, who are kind of starting to delve into what it is to create a language of body. And to broaden that out so that the whole community, maybe the whole world, is involved in that conversation, we need to have some way to give everybody in the world access to the movement language. And when I mean everybody in the world, the design of the rEvolve program is that it is inclusive, including people with various, what we might call disabilities or impairments. And in that way, this experiment has to be of a facilitated nature. I can no more choreograph action here that's going to be meaningful for everybody as someone else might think they could choreograph such movement for me as a now 60-year-old male. So we can start, and this is where my physiotherapy experience comes in, having seen probably thousands of different types of disabilities and impairments among people. There is a way to start with the movement experiment that everyone can join in from wherever they are with whatever they've got. Now, there are very, very few of us in the world who haven't got some kind of impairment. Very, very few of us. And even among those who start out with an almost uniquely perfect motor system, it tends to have become impacted upon either by the types of activities they undertake or simply nature itself and the environment. So that by 35, we're getting to where 99% of people are feeling a little impacted by life. And by 50, and in the 50s, that's growing up to 99.9%, or so it seems to me. And that doesn't mean big impacts, but there are a lot of people who have significant impacts by the time they're 50, even if they've started out with what they probably thought was a very, very good setup when they were 20. So those who have worked hard their whole lives because they started out with some obvious impacts might even find themselves equal to the challenge of anyone else at 50. I'm at 60, and I'm hoping that when I'm 80, I'll still be moving fairly well by going through some of the dance work and continuing to do that over those next 20 years. So let's make a start on the experiment. To try and delve in with what would be a basic unit of a movement, of a language of movement, let's try to look at what are basic, simple movements in our body anyhow. We're so very good at movement under the radar of our awareness that we'll often think we're doing something simple and then actually be doing something quite complex. It's not unusual for me in a group to say, do a simple movement, and someone does something like this. Wonderful. A lot of people can do something like this straight off the back. But it's not simple. You can kind of lose count of the movements that actually go into that movement. So we can start off really saying that a simple movement is something that might look like this. It might look like turning my head like this, of lifting my toes like this. The first exercise then for today, the first part of the experiment, is to get for yourself what a simple movement is and start to enjoy the beauty and finesse of simple movement. Now, to do this, what I want you to do, from wherever you are, whether you're standing or sitting or even lying down, is to get into your imagination one simple movement with one part of your body. Remember, you've got a head with a neck, you've got a trunk and a chest and a waist, and you've got a pelvis and hips and knees and ankles and toes and shoulders and elbows and hands and fingers, and poetically a nose, which few of us can move with any agility. So, thinking of all of that, pick one part and one simple movement. And do nothing yet, except get it clear in your imagination, in your image-making machine. or mush in here. And have the movement occur there in your imagination, clearly, accurately, exactly as you want it. And repeat that in your imagination 7, 8, 9, 10 times. See how you can look at it internally and externally for yourself. This will improve your actual body image as you go through this work. And that in itself, getting a more accurate image of your body and body parts and movements of, are going to be really important in the possibility of human beings developing a common language of body. So now that you've done that very, very accurately in your imagination, I want you now to perform the movement several times for yourself there at home. Now, I'm starting this project online in the middle of the COVID-19 virus epidemic or pandemic, with many, many people isolating themselves or keeping a distance from each other, not coming together in groups. And eventually, for this work, we need to come together in some way to share. So, when you see this clip, send me a message, write me a comment depending on where you see it, and let me know that you're interested in being included in an invitation for a Zoom experiment. That'll be an ongoing experiment. I'd like to see this experiment take off around the world. And truly, I can only provide the facilitation in English at the moment. However, if you have enough English to be able to follow this, or can get it, then the work you need to do is mainly the body. So now that you've done that exercise with one movement, I want you to do another movement. Pick another part of the body and go through the same process. Get the movement clear in your mind and imagination. Repeat it very clearly, very accurately, 7 or 10 times. And then do it in life a similar number of times. And then add another movement. I want you to complete 5 movements in this fashion and leave it at that, because we really need to share once you've got to that point. And so message me, communicate in some way, and I'll invite you to this interactive session where you can get to share your movements. And remember, there are no right or wrong answers here. This is a huge, huge area of work. And I can assure you, if you've got only the bare minimal of movement in your body, and you're in an electric wheelchair, and about the most you can do is get that scooting around, I can assure you, I've seen dancers in that situation, performing wonderfully. And performing wonderfully with some really quite highly trained dancers. I have a wonderful friend called Elise Patterson in Boston, who has a marvellous company called Abilities Boston. You can see some of her work online. She has, I think, follows a motto that I follow, that anyone can dance, and anyone can dance with anyone. So join in. Eventually we'll bring a crowd. For now, we'll bring a crowd online. So let me know. Do your little work, send me a message, I'll send you an invite, and we can kick off this experiment. See you soon.